More and more Kenyans are these days focusing on the future of Kenyan politics. Very few are discussing about current ongoing politics. And that tells you a lot. Because, for starters, it tells you that what we have at present, it is done. And we're done with it. And therefore, despite what government bloggers are trying very hard to tell us, most Kenyans are correctly focusing on the future. But there's something very strange that happened recently. Former President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta came out to make a statement that directly addressed something Kenyans are very much discussing currently. Now, what would make Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta Kenya's fourth president? Break his silence on ongoing politics. Even take sides. Oh yes. What is this thing that is so important? Actually, it is one name. Fred Matiangi. Now I'm well aware that many of us are saying in their hearts, Chris is not serious. Fred Matiangi, so what? I understand, but please hear me out. There is a mystery in this whole Matiangi issue that needs Kenyans to pay very close attention. Because if they don't, we can very easily land in the same ditch we are trying to get out of. Oh yes. But as usual, let us start this story at the beginning. Okay? Now, before a presidential campaign starts, a serious presidential campaign, it has something called backers. And these backers, as we've seen in the past, are not only financial backers, but they are also deep state backers. And indeed, you really don't need the finances. If you have deep state backing, then you're home and dry. Now I know somebody will shoot a question and say, hey, in 2022, Raila people told us that they had deep state support. How come Raila is not president today? Okay, maybe this will surprise you. Raila did not have the support of the correct deep state. I will go more deeply into that, so don't worry if you have no clue what I'm talking about. But to emphasize my point, let me give you evidence in a story. In the run-up to the 2013 presidential elections, the then President Emilio Stanley Mwai Kibaki decided that based on the work he had already done, some very good work on the Kenyan economy, the only person who would ensure continuity, the only person who would ensure that what he had done would move forward, would have to be an economist. And therefore, he decided that his choice as successor would be a man called Musalia Mudavadi. I'm sure all the Kenyans remember that story. It was absolutely true. And because Mwai Kibaki was president then, he had all the power. And therefore, he gave that assignment to the deep state to ensure that they would make Musalia Mudavadi the next president of Kenya. Even the intelligence community were given the right instructions and the right project started. And it looked for a time that nothing could stop Musalia Mudavadi. Okay? I believe even Musalia Mudavadi himself knew he was the next president. He was going to be number 4. He knew it. Nothing could stop him. The deep state in Kenya was fully behind him. What could stop him? But of course, as we all know, something went terribly wrong. And we need to understand what this is that went wrong. It all started with a man nobody saw coming. He came in from nowhere. Nobody was expecting him to come in and change things. Nobody saw him coming. And of course the name of that man is William Samoei Ruto. At the time, both Ruto and Uhuru Kenyatta were facing very serious charges at the International Criminal Court at The Hague. Charges to do with crimes against humanity linked to the 2007 and 2008 tribal clashes. And the evidence against one of those people who was charged was overwhelming. It was going to be an open and shut case. And people started getting very nervous. And they started running all over the place. Please note this story has never been told before. And it's also sensitive. They started running all over the place, seeking advice, consulting widely, both locally and internationally. Now, Uhuru Kenyatta was very lucky because it was discovered that the ICC prosecutors had a strategy to nail Mwai Kibaki. And this strategy was to get a successful conviction against Uhuru Kenyatta, which would point directly to Mwai Kibaki. And so state machinery, the well-financed, powerful state machinery, especially the intelligence community, were put to work to ensure that the prosecution against Uhuru Kenyatta would fail. Okay? And of course that left a man called Ruto extremely vulnerable, because it was very clear somebody had to go down for this. Okay? And now that one of the main suspects, was being taken care of, that meant that this other person would have to face the music. In an ingenious move, Ruto decided to convince everybody that there was no way that the state machinery alone would succeed in saving Uhuru and by extension Kibaki. And therefore there was only one option, only one way of saving Kibaki and Uhuru. And that was if Uhuru Kenyatta would be elected the next president of Kenya. That was the only way. Because as president of Kenya, he would have access to making deals internationally. He would have access to international contacts in his capacity. And that is the only thing that was going to save Kibaki and Uhuru. Now it was not very easy, this convincing. Ruto did a lot of work. Okay, we shall not go into those details for now. But finally, he succeeded. Now older Kenyans will remember that there's something very interesting that happened. At the beginning, Uhuru was fully backing Musalia Mudavadi to succeed Kibaki and take over as president. And from the outside, it seemed as if there was a lot of pressure on Uhuru Kenyatta, especially from Mount Kenya, that he vies for the presidency. Well, what you need to know today is that was manufactured. It was all part of the plan to ensure that Uhuru would be the man and not Mudavadi. However, the most critical part of this whole scheme was to rope in an international deep state with vast interest in Kenya. Okay? People could not afford to have things go wrong in Kenya. In a nutshell, what happened in 2013 is very similar to what happened in 2022. Because in 2022, you'll remember, Raila had the support of the local deep state. But at the end of the day, it was the international, or rather an international deep state, that held sway, and Ruto became president. In 2013, Uhuru became president instead of Musalia Mudavadi. Now I believe by now most of us have gathered why I said at the beginning of the show that this Fred Matiangi issue deserves the full attention of all Kenyans. Oh yes. But before we go into that, please allow me to remind you that Kumekucha, the Kumekucha brand, is celebrating 20 years. Okay? And as part of that celebration, I want to interrupt today's show by giving you a brief story of some dramatic events behind the scenes linked to the Kumekucha brand. Yeah, super fascinating stuff. And I believe this is still super sensitive. Okay, but here goes. In the year 2013, I was able to get a source for information very deep and very high up in government. Somebody who wanted to blow the whistle. Why? Because there was a certain very powerful character within that government who had done too much bloodletting and was still doing it. And therefore this person, his conscience couldn't take it. And therefore he decided that it is time to get information out there on what is really happening. And for whatever reason, maybe also because of the people they knew, they decided that the best way to get this information out would be through Kumekucha. And they gave me some mind-blowing information that I published in my blog at that time. I used most of the information they gave me, but not all of it. Some of it was very difficult or virtually impossible to verify. And then also, it was very crazy, too crazy to publish. Okay? But then along the way, I started getting very, very nervous about this source of mine. I noticed that they were rather careless. They didn't understand fully the kind of risk they were taking. You know, one day, they got in touch with me. And during the course of the interaction, I happened to ask, by the way, where are you sending me this email from? And they replied, the name of a very prominent government building. I could not believe it. I told them, please, that is not safe. Their response, oh, you know, I know a bit about computers. I've trained in computers out of the country. I know what I'm doing. But I continued to be very nervous. And then suddenly, they vanished. The family of this person reported that he was missing. Okay? And of course I suspected that it had something to do with our interactions. I'm telling you, I felt so bad. Indeed, he was never found to date. Okay? And from that day, I became paranoid. I became so paranoid when I received sensitive information. Many times I even disguise a few things here and there without changing the facts, so that somebody who takes in the information can never guess what my source of information may have been. I learned a very hard, bitter lesson. I felt so bad. I even felt guilty. I could imagine what the family of this young person were feeling. And that dark incident has never left me. Yeah, even today, I am so careful about my sources and about protecting them that I go to extremes. Sometimes I don't even release information if I think it'll endanger my source. Well, that's just me. Yeah, but that's how I operate. Anyway, I hope to be sharing with you other super fascinating, interesting insights from the 20 challenging but great years of the Kumekucha brand. So let us continue with what we're discussing. Hope you enjoyed that. Now, those who follow politics keenly in Kenya will have noticed that the candidacy for the presidency of Kenya of a man called Fred Matiangi seems to have extraordinary backing. It has crazy financial backing, but it also has backing of very powerful people. Okay? And it is very important we figure out why, because it is important that Kenyans know why. The why in this instance is critical. On the other hand, we have another candidate, formidable candidate, who is on the minds of so many Kenyans, the former Chief Justice, David Maraga. Now, David Maraga has no backing to speak of. The only backing Maraga has seems to be organic from the people of Kenya, from patriots, from the people who understand Kenya and where we are right now, and the people who understand that for us to save our country, we must completely change everything. Okay? And that must start with electing a president who can follow the Constitution to the letter. That's all we need. We don't need somebody with creative ideas. And of course, Maraga fits the bill. And of course, the other name that keeps on popping up is that of Busia Senator Okia Omtata. Okay? Some people have even talked about a team of Omtata and Maraga. But these people don't have support. The major support, including online, where there seems to be hundreds of thousands of bloggers out there pushing Matiangi day and night. Okay? Matiangi has support. Why? And maybe I also need to remind you that former President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta has been so concerned that it seems Kenyans have discovered that Matiangi has some special backing, and some of them are saying it is Uhuru Kenyatta who is fully behind his candidature. And Uhuru has come out and said, no, we have never discussed anything like that with Matiangi. However, when the time comes to vote, I may cast my one vote to support Bwana Matiangi. That's what Uhuru has said. But let us dive into the why. Now, the powerful in Kenya and beyond have analysts in their employment. And these people can clearly see where the country is going. Kenyans are very angry. And it is rather obvious that one of the things that is going to happen when there's a change of regime in Kenya is that the Kenyan people will demand a full refund from those people who have been linked to the disappearance of public funds. Okay? And it is also clear that the people of Kenya may go back a long time. It is highly likely they could go back to 1963. This is the fear amongst Wenye Kenya, the really powerful. Now, of course, you know what that means. It means that there are many billionaires in Kenya who could have their entire assets wiped out, poof, in one stroke of the pen. So do you think these people are going just to stand around, Zubari, waiting for it to happen? No. They have now been forced to come into the game and play an active role of ensuring that the successful candidate to be the next president of Kenya is on their side, and that certain deals are made. And of course, these deals cannot be made with David Maraga. No, the man is too principled. These deals cannot be made with Okia Omtata. No way. It's too principled. However, if they had their own candidate, somebody who understands them, somebody who's almost part of them, because he's linked to a family that is part of the Wenye Kenya, if I can put it like that. And that makes Fred Matiangi the perfect presidential candidate for them, not for the Kenyan people. To cut to the chase, unless something extraordinary happens, Fred Matiangi is going to be the next president of Kenya. Why? Because he has the backing of the international deep state. Remember this, when Kenya have very strong links with certain foreign people. Okay? And just like in 2013, when Mudavadi had the support of the local deep state, and Uhuru Kenyatta had the support of the international deep state, and Uhuru won. And again in 2022, when Raila had the support of the local deep state, but Ruto had the support of the international deep state. In the same way, Fred Matiangi, with not only the support, but heavy backing from the international deep state, currently he looks unstoppable. That is the harsh reality of politics I'm speaking about. Please don't get me wrong. I'm not supporting Matiangi. No! I'm not supporting Fred, Baby Pendo, Matiangi. No way. But I'm just talking about the harsh reality of politics. Okay, and I've given you examples from 2013, 2022. Yes. Oh boy. I know that is not good news. But then the good news is that we are in a different Kenya today. The international deep state succeeded in the past. But one thing I can guarantee you is that there is no guarantee, there is no surety that going forward they will succeed this time around. Hakuna. Nobody can give you assurances on that. Maybe in 2022, maybe in 2013, not now. Now, very quickly before I go, I hope you enjoyed the small story I told you from the annals of history of the Kumekucha brand. And I believe you can now see details on your screen right now in case you want to participate in gifting the Kumekucha brand, in gifting yours truly on this very momentous occasion and celebration, because 20 years is not a joke. Yeah, I'll be very grateful. In case you've missed my earlier videos, there'll be no media gifting this year. We're just focusing on this great milestone of the Kumekucha brand. Okay? And of course, one of the reasons why I'm still here has been your support over the years. And therefore, I want to say thank you very much in advance for your wonderful gifts as I keep on celebrating these 20 years. This far Almighty God has brought me. I may not have arrived here with all those we started with all those who played key roles with, but I celebrate and I'm full of joy that God has allowed me to see this season and this time. Asanteni sana. Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha.